I work for local government in the suburbs of Melbourne, Australia. I've flown to Goa in India to attend the Asset-Based Community Development Festival put on by the Bank of Ideas. Asset-Based Community Development, or ABCD, is about connecting and mobilising the strengths that exist within communities. It is about citizen-led and owned actions and initiatives. But if ABCD is all about communities doing things themselves, what is it that local government and other powerful institutions can do to help? That's what I'm here to find out.
I'm passionate about asset-based, community-driven ABCD stuff, and I love an opportunity to bring together people who also care about it and to have that kind of like share of experience and hopefully for all of us to deepen our awareness and our skills in that area. Look, I operate on a fairly simple model, and it's about trying to turn upside down our common way that institutions have kind of like controlled and run communities. I believe passionately that asset-based community development is not about doing things to community, and it's not about doing things for community. It's not even necessarily just doing things with community, like asking them what they want. It's about opening doors and windows to enable community to do things by themselves. So to me what matters is community, positive community development is of and by the people themselves.
55 people from 11 different countries came to Goa to share their knowledge and absorb the knowledge of others. And as I listened to them speak, I noticed the deep respect and connection that they had with the communities that they worked with. They had relationships with them. They didn't call them client or resident, they called them citizens. And reflecting on the relationship between local government and the citizens that they serve, I noticed that there's often a missing ingredient which can stabilise the relationship, and that's trust.
Progress occurs at the speed of trust. And so organisations can't trust one another. Government can't trust community because it's only humans that can trust one another. And so essentially what you have to build is not an impersonal world of one block or silo wanting to trust another. It's about people meeting and getting to know one another, and from that point basically building a relationship. Without that you can't have the trust.
I think trust is about personal relationships. Do you trust the person in front of you? When you're looking eyeball to eyeball, do you trust that person? Do we trust an institution? It depends on the people that are in it. So if you've got a relationship with them, of course, then you're more likely to trust them. So yeah, I think it's much more about personal relationships. But therein lies part of the challenge for those of us in institutions and in government to be out the office as much as possible and to be forming the relationships with people. If we're behind our desks, they won't see us. So how can we form a relationship with someone that we don't see or don't know?
This is Dee Brooks, and she's a self-proclaimed nomad who travels the world and enters new communities to uncover the existing strengths that its citizens hold. I wanted to know from her how she goes about building trust and respectful relationships in such short timeframes.
Lots of questions, lots of conversations, lots of cups of tea. I remember there was a lady at a workshop in Kempsey for the council workshop, and at the end of the 2-day ABCD workshop she said, I'm going to be having lots more cups of tea. So it really is about, yarning and going into conversation. There was once a job description for ABCD that was go into the community for the first 12 months and do nothing. So of course by doing nothing, so much happens.
Absolutely. Howard Rosing is a lecturer from a university in the US. Speaking with him helped me realise that often government and institutions are far too quick to take control over neighbourhood action. Services aren't always the answer.
Especially from an ABCD framework, institutions need to begin by being really good listeners, really listening to the degree by which they stop offering any kinds of aid or ideas or prescriptions for community change, but rather listen to what the communities are already doing, identify those connectors and knowledge bases within the community that already exist, and begin to think about what a relationship might be with those folks.
Recognising what is it that communities can do for themselves and what is it that we need services to do. Because I want someone that's qualified if they're going to operate on me. So you do need services, but it's figuring out that relationship. So the classic example is probably something like befriending. We do have befriending services in lots and lots of different places, because certainly in the developed world we have a loneliness epidemic. And our response is service provision. But do you really want someone to volunteer to be your friend, or do you actually want a friend? And I know what I would prefer. I'd prefer to have a friend. So the only way you're actually going to get that is by connecting with the people around you. And of course we have to think about the nuancing of the process to get people connected. And sometimes you do need people that are going to walk alongside to build confidence. But as paid professionals in that space, we also have to know when we need to get out of the way and create sustainability by just saying, okay, it's time that I step back now and moved aside.
There is a role for both government and community to play in creating strong neighbourhoods. Dee spoke to me about a video which highlights this point perfectly.
The parable of the blobs and squares, and it's a fantastic piece, and I've showed that at quite a few workshops for government, and they get very squirmy, but also, I mean, we see ourselves in it so easily. And in that they talk about how like government or people in a role might be the squares and the community members are the blobs.
They are, well, blobbish. Blobs change and don't like being stacked and arranged and organised.
But quite often what will happen is that they will still have these expectations of the squares will have expectations of the blobs, right? And so then the blobs will form a committee, they will have a strategic plan, they will fill out forms, they will, do all of this, and it's like the squares are trying to reshape the blobs into little mini squares. And so it's not actually acknowledging the wealth of knowledge and how important it is to be a blob.
While the squares may well be the experts in the process, the blobs have something equally important and something the solution needs: the context. Co-production is a partnership where the process and context have equal value, where squares and blobs need and value each other for who they are and what they can give. One is not more important or valuable than the other.
India had many examples of local government handing control over to communities when there were active citizens eager to take it on. I asked Richard if he thought this could happen in a Western context, like in the UK or here in Australia.
So I'm just thinking about, there's a place near where I live where the council have a big contract for mowing the verges across the community. But in one particular place, there was a group of residents that said, we'd be happy to take that on. So can we have a conversation with local council about setting up a kind of a hyper-local grass cutting service? And can we do the lawns and the public spaces rather than your main contractor? And the council said, yeah, we would love that. So they're challenging themselves to think in a different way, not to go for a one-size-fits-all contract with a big service provider, but figuring out how can we use our relationships to enable that to happen at a local level. I think the tension though for government, particularly local government, is sometimes you're then managing many contracts, which if you view the world from an efficiency perspective, that's not very efficient, but it is relational. Yeah. So there was a piece that was written a little while ago by a lady called Julia Unwin, who talked about kindness being the blind spot of public policy. And she describes two lexicons, one being a rational worldview and one being a relational worldview. So I guess my challenge back to local government is, yes, we have a lot of rational work and we're very logical in how we commission things and how we purchase and procure stuff. But are we being relational in how we do it, or are we just going for the cheapest service provider?
It's really important to clarify what ABCD is all about and what it isn't. There's a risk of leaving communities behind if this point isn't made clear.
Now, it's not about saying there's a critical perspective here that is a more global political perspective that must be sort of implanted, because there's a fundamental critique that ABCD could be saying, people coming out from the outside could be saying, oh, you already have the resources and skills to do it yourself, to solve your structural inequalities. Mistake number one. That's not what ABCD is about. ABCD is about building power within communities through association, through skills and talents that have been invisible perhaps, that are now becoming visible, that are now being connected with other skills and talents within the communities, and therefore power emerges in a way that can mean that people begin to understand it and have the confidence to demand equity.
Yes. So where do we begin? Peter Kenyon shared some really practical advice with me on my last day before I headed home.
So to me, the role of institutions is to open doors and windows to enable people to do things. The first question you should ask is, what is it people can do for themselves without us? The second question is, what is it people need a little bit of help with? And thirdly, what is it that communities can't do that an institution or an agency need to come in and do for them? We have always assumed that the answer is government, agencies, NGOs, and the result is that we have basically disempowered people in the process, and we wonder why people are waiting for others now to do things for them. And fourthly, what is it we've got to stop doing? Which I think is critical. And I say often, look, if you're going to have a team staff meeting, put those questions up, get people starting to think this way, and begin to see that at the end of the day, what we need to do is lead by stepping back.